my mouth, saying I never would be found. So scared as away we went, he barely made a sound. Paralyzed, I couldn't move. I was stolen in the night. I prayed and prayed for it to end, pleading with all my might. The angels looked up to the stars to find where I had gone. Viewing the scene from far away, intuitively they were drawn. They saw my tears, felt my fears, and answered all my prayers. How they saw and knew it all, I'll never know. But I'm going home. I'm going home. How they saw and knew it all, I'll never know. But I'm going home. I'm going home. Thank you, Project Psi.
Good evening and welcome back. Talk is Cheap is back. This is second season for us, and we have a jam-packed night. It's crazy how many people are on this panel. A very important topic tonight. Hits home for a lot of people, so we're excited to have all these experts on tonight. Now, we had a bit of a glitch here, so I'm going to start from the top. I'm a little bit out of sorts here. We're missing a couple of people tonight due to illness, so we wish them well, and let's start. My name is Amelia Pisano, and I am live for you tonight from Seattle. Talk is Cheap is kicking off its second season tonight, which you know with human trafficking. Expect to have all of your questions answered by our expert panel, starting with Dr. Chuck Kennedy, who is a dear friend and a colleague. Dr. Chuck Kennedy has a PhD in neuroscience. He is also the founder of Project Psi Institute of Research Lab. Welcome, Dr. Kennedy. How are you tonight?
I'm fine.
Good.
It's good to do a second season. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, my goodness. Feels good, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, this should be a good show tonight. Got some great people.
Mm-hmm. Now, you are going to start us off. We have such a full podcast tonight that we are not taking callers unless there is time left. And we were not opening up a chat room. But if you'd like to try in the second half, please call in. Number is 319-527-6060. Sorry, 213-943-3355. Get the wrong number. Press 1 to be on air, or you can use that number to listen from your phone and in the convenience of whatever you want to do. If you're outside, walking around, please share the link with your friends and your family. This is an important show for so many. Whether you have children or not, it's happening in your community, and there are so many ways that you can help. And we're going to explain that all to you tonight. So I'm going to shut up while Dr. Kennedy takes over.
Okay, thanks, Amelia.
Thank you.
I'd like to start out by introducing the panel we have tonight. We have just such an amazing, so credentialed, and a group that has such terrific pedigrees in the world of human trafficking, starting with Sergeant Kathy Stewart, who is head of the Human Trafficking Unit for the Hamilton, Ontario, Canada Police Department. She's very experienced in dealing with human trafficking. And we have Stephen Mormino, Lieutenant Stephen Mormino, who's retired from FDNY. He's out of Brooklyn, and he has, as a first responder, he's seen it firsthand. We also have Candace Morley, who runs a human trafficking resource group at the YMCA in Hamilton, Burlington, and Brantford in Ontario. And we also have Sandra Sparks, who is the executive director of Erase Child Trafficking, a phenomenal group that's been working on child trafficking for some time. And Karina Steerer, who is also with Erase Human Trafficking, and she's the awareness speaker. So we've got this great group of people, and it just all in all should be a good group. I'd like to initially talk a real little bit about, as Amelia said, I founded Project Psi Institute, which is how we became aware of human trafficking. 2 years ago, I started, as a neuroscientist, I was studying mediums and psychics and remote viewers. And I put together a team of forensic remote viewers as well as psychic remote viewers, and we started locating abducted children. In the last 24 months, our team has brought home 44 children, and a third of them were victims of human trafficking. So this is what brought it to our attention. And where Amelia and I are at now is that we've started a foundation. We felt that we could contribute most to the fight against human trafficking by servicing the survivors. And that's where we're at. So we started the Power of Hope Foundation. And one of the tools that we use at the Power of Hope Foundation is we have an ID My Child kit. And that ID My Child kit is a book, a diary, so that you have the information you need about your child. It has a bite plate so you can have dental impressions of your child's teeth, DNA swabs, and fingerprint kit. And for a $14.95 donation to the Power of Hope, we sell these kits. However, tonight, I will be giving away sets. Each set contains 5 ID My Child kits, and I will be giving away 5 of these. So all you have to do, if you want 5 ID My Child kits for free, just go to the powerofhopefoundation.org, and at the Human Trafficking page, on the bottom of the Human Trafficking page is a link to fill out a form, and the first 5 people who send me an email from this form will get 5 ID My Child kits, and we'll be off and running with that. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about powerofhopefoundation.org later in the show. But one of the things I wanted to bring up initially is, so often when we say human trafficking, the public thinks their perception of human trafficking is children that are kidnapped off the streets and shipped to Indonesia or some faraway country. And that's more human smuggling. Human trafficking, for the most part, is where children are lured into the various trafficking trades, whether it be the slave trade, the sex trade, or the organ procurement trade. And in many cases, these kids are working the sex industry and still living at home, right under their parents' eye. And they're so traumatized, they go out and they turn tricks and they give the money to the traffickers and they go back home. So human trafficking is the sale of humans, whether it be for slavery, whether it be for organs, or whether it be for sex. But it's not human smuggling per se. And I just wanted to make sure that the general public just had that clearly understood. And let's take a quick second and listen to a little thought on that.
While the majority of human trafficking is for sex and a great deal for labor, people are also trafficked for organ harvesting.
Okay.
So, Doc, I just wanted to mention that again. You're giving away 5 kits. Now, you're giving away 5 kits to 5 families.
Right, so 25
right.
total.
25 total. Phenomenal. Thank you. Okay, are we ready to start? This has always been a tough one for me because I often run into people and they always ask questions about what I do. And often in society, we have a media visual of what a victim looks like, what we're told to look at. And the whole thing with that is that it's not always real. Okay, it has in human trafficking, it's proven to be wrong. So I want to talk to Kat and Sandra about who is vulnerable to this victimization. Kathy?
Well, pretty much everybody could be vulnerable to it. It's not just, sometimes people think it's the street kids, right? The runaways.
Mm-hmm.
They are vulnerable to it, but so are kids who are like the doc said, they're like middle class kids who are going to high school and come home on the weekends, and they're home in the evenings, take off for the weekends. It's pretty much anyone who has a vulnerability that a trafficker, who is basically a predator, can find basically that little crack to tap, and then just kind of work in on that to the point where this person's going to basically trust them in the beginning before it all basically turns into a nightmare for them. So it can be anybody.
Okay. Is Sandra?
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Sorry.
I think when it comes to traffickers, they're really good at picking up the vulnerabilities in somebody. They have that knack of finding that one thing. Definitely in areas around the country, we've seen that it is community kids. It's kids who have two parents. It's kids who have never been in trouble, have never been in the juvenile justice system. And like Kat was saying, the parents don't even know that this is what's happening, and they're at home every night. And then at a higher risk, you do have runaways and kids who are homeless because nobody's looking for them, so therefore they're easy prey for traffickers. Anyone that has any type of economic vulnerability, if a child is in a family that they don't have enough food, they don't have money to pay their bills, often they can see it as they need to contribute to the household, so that they will find ways to do that, and that makes them vulnerable. Low self-esteem, mental and physical disabilities. Again, it's anything that makes them vulnerable can open the door for a trafficker, unfortunately.
Yeah. Doc?
Well, let's listen to a quick fact on that.
Once girls enter the sex industry, their average life expectancy is 7 years, with homicide and AIDS being the top killers.
So these victims who get pulled in, I always get so frustrated when I hear that, it's child prostitution. These children don't have the consent. They don't have the cognitive ability to buy a house, to buy a car, to take out a loan, but they have the cognitive ability to sell themselves. Any child involved in the sex trafficking ring is out and out a victim, plain and simple. They aren't consciously prostitutes. I just don't accept that at all.
I think everybody would agree with you on that one.
Yeah, but as you and I know, we've returned kids that we found, and when the police come in and come to the scene, they arrest the child as a prostitute, and we've seen that happen, and that's just really just isn't acceptable.
Okay, Kathy, isn't there something that right now in Canada where they're trying to amend that and change how that's happening? Kathy? Doc, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I guess we lost Kathy.
Kathy's mic is on. I don't know what happened.
I don't know. Okay, Sandra, are you seeing a difference in that now, though? It's not, because I do hear a lot about it, that they're trying to change that to protect the victims, and that they are looking at it differently. At one time, they would arrest a prostitute, and that was it. You were in, and now they're going in and they're discussing, having conversations with these victims and seeing them as victims.
It's slowly changing. I mean, by federal law, if you're under the age of 18, you cannot consent to solicitation. So by law, under the age of 18, if they are exploited, it is against the law. What happens is a lot of local law enforcement, they get age of consent confused with prostitution and exploitation. So they feel that just because they're under the age of 18, but they're at the age of consent, it kind of can make things confusing. But by law in the U.S., if you're under the age of 18, you are a victim.
Okay.
In some states, there are safe harbor laws, and where the states that have safe harbor laws, they cannot be arrested, and they have different programs for them. But not every state is a safe harbor law. So you can be charged under a state law, but not federally. So it's still very new in the U.S., and it's still very confusing for local law enforcement.
Okay, Kathy, your opinion on that? What do you have to say about the way things have changed? We were talking about how they're seen as victims now rather than criminals, and you're going in there having conversations with them and trying to help them. Have the laws changed to protect the girls now?
Well, definitely here in Canada in 2014, they legalized prostitution, and the same with what Sandra said. So under 18, like our age of consent up here is 16, but if someone is being, exploited and in the sex industry under 18, because our laws are stricter, when someone's found to be a victim of human trafficking under the age of 18, we have increased penalties for that. So when you say about consent and with regards to any of the HT victims, there is no consent because they're being exploited. They're being forced to work in this industry, so they are victims. And when we train our other officers and we do our presentations in the community, we remind them that a victim of human trafficking, who's in the sexual industry here, they're not consenting. So technically, they're being sexually assaulted, raped over and over and over again because this isn't what they agreed to do in the first place. They've been forced to do this. So we treat them, everyone as victims. We do check on well-being for those who are 18 or older and doing it independently because obviously our laws say it's legal. It's legal to sell here. It's illegal to purchase. So. But there are some times we have to remind officers, but we make sure we treat them with utmost respect and definitely with kid gloves when we know that we have victims who are being exploited here.
Okay, thank you. Doc, do you have anything on this?
No, it's so good because, as you know, that we had that case down in Texas, and the 13-year-old girl was arrested, and that just made me sick. So I'm so glad to see that the word is getting out there and that the laws are changing and embracing these children who are nothing but victims.
Oh, absolutely. It's very important because, I always say, like, how many 12-year-olds do you know that are going into prostitution by choice? It's always that way.
Exactly.
But laws are tricky as well. So, we have to, that's why we have Kathy out there. Chuck, you're up next.
Okay, let's listen to a little something.
It is estimated that there are 100,000 children pulled into the sex trade in the United States and Canada each year.
So that's what I'd like to talk about for a few minutes. What is the scope of sex trafficking in Canada and in the USA? And Kathy, it seems to be exploding in Canada as well as the USA, but Canada seems to be really aggressively going after human trafficking. Do you see that that there's an increase in the trafficking, and is it manageable?
I don't know if I would say that there's increase of trafficking. I think it appears that it is definitely occurring. It's occurring, coast to coast here in Canada and everybody's communities, and you'd be amazed at how many people will say, "What? That goes on here?" But it does. But I think it's just because of the exposure that it's getting between social media and law enforcement and things like that we're recognizing it more. People are starting to see the signs. We're obviously training our own officers to better observe something that they may have thought could have been a domestic or an assault or something is actually trafficking. I can only talk from our experience here where I am in Hamilton, so I'm just about 45 minutes west of Toronto. But definitely our province and throughout Canada, I know at least with our province, we have our provincial police, the OPP, that organizes, and we basically have a network of investigators throughout the province with every single police force, and our intelligence sharing has expanded it's huge, and it really helps with basically working our cases. That allows us to deal with other police services because we're sharing information, and with everyone being so transient, being so mobile, that these victims are being taken from city to city, weekends, they'll be in one city one day, 3 or 4 hours away the next day, and we're able to work together if we recover a victim in our city and we know they've been to, say, Toronto or up north somewhere, I have easy contacts with the police services there, and we work on our cases together. So it's definitely we're trying to get caught up with the states with regards to our training and recognizing it, and trying to be out there being proactive as opposed to reactive, and locating victims. But I definitely, in our experience recently, I've been in here about 2 years. Majority of our age, our youngest victim that we've dealt with is 12. And mind you, we get adults up into their 30s and 40s who are involved in it as well. But we also have traffickers who are low in age, 14-year-olds who are trafficking other victims. Yeah. So far, us personally have had accused traffickers who are 14, 15. So I'd hate to say that they're learning. Right, the traffickers are learning, and basically we got to get caught up and get on top of it and educate the public. Right, not only our potential victims, but also people who could turn into potential traffickers.
That is incredible.
It's just more exposure. Yeah, it's pretty.
Are you seeing?
Yeah, I had no idea that it's all the way to 14. How is that happening?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't want to say, Sandra mentioned too, we do have vulnerable kids and street kids, habitual runaways, but also the group homes, right? So we have boys group homes and girls group homes, and some of these boys, and not just boys, there's girls who are traffickers as well, who, like you said, they know how that vulnerability is, right? And they're seeing out there, and they're seeing a fast way to make money, and unfortunately it's at the expense of another human being. So, but just trying to keep on top of it, and we're trying, Candace will vouch for me here because we're working a lot together, is to get out there and get into the schools and try and start at grade 7 so that we can educate. But I think with regards to ages, I've read articles and I see on the news the cases down throughout the United States and the number of children, and I mean children, when I think of children, I'm thinking under the age of 12. And it just floors me. I almost say, thank God I haven't come across really 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old victims. But I don't want to sit here and say we don't have them up here. We just got to find them, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's days where I'm sure you and Sandra agree with me. I know Doc does, where you're looking at these cases and you're looking at these news stories and you just want to throw everything. It just seems so overwhelming at times. Yeah.
And I come from 4 years of working in the child abuse branch, right? So when I move over to this side, to the human trafficking part, it's it's unreal, right? But they're closely linked, right? So because we did have cases where
very much so,
in child abuse branch, where we had an adult lady's boyfriend who was basically selling his girlfriend's daughter on Craigslist and having people come to the house. So, but we got him. Luckily, we got him. And
was she aware?
Almost pretty much. She claims not, but they did end up charging her with a lesser offense. But there was 4 or 5 other people that luckily they were idiots, and they filmed it. But every single one, luckily, has been located, arrested, and charged accordingly. So everyone's doing their jail time now. So that was a good one.
Kathy, are you seeing much trafficking of organ harvesting?
Me personally, not to date, and I don't know of anyone of my colleagues throughout the province who have come across it, but we know that falls under the human trafficking realm, and we do touch on that in our presentations, but there's not a lot to go on because we haven't seen that, and I don't know of a case up here, actually in Canada, that I'm aware of, but I'm sure somebody will be able to point that one out to me if I'd missed that. So what about you guys down there? You're seeing that?
Sandra, what's your take on the organ harvesting? Do you see much of that in the States?
Not officially. I mean, we haven't seen anything and we're with law enforcement agencies teaching it. It hasn't come up. But I do have a good friend of mine who works with a nonprofit in Europe and in Asia that deals specifically with organ trafficking, and there's a prevalence in Asia and China. Unfortunately, they see a lot of organ trafficking there within the refugee camps, and there's organ trafficking.
There's a lot of money and a lot of value to organs. Steve, I want to ask you, as a former firefighter, did you ever come across that?
I haven't seen any type of organ trafficking at all, but there are things, that always I wonder now as I'm educating myself on what's gone on. Did I really see things that I could have gotten involved in and reported and that would have caught my attention? New York City is famous for homelessness as well as just about anything goes. And, the more eyes that are out there, the better everybody would be. So, we definitely need to get the awareness out there.
Definitely. Absolutely. And I just want to mention that Steve is our first responder on 9/11. I adore him, and I actually met him in Barbados. So I just want to say thank you for your service, and hi to Diane. I know she's listening.
Yes, she is.
Doc, tell her I said hello. Doc, where are we at here? I just kind of lost track. Am I next? I kind of lost track here.
We're up on who are the traffickers. Let's do
I don't need
a little clip for that.
Question for me. I have it in front of me. But thank you. It's the altitude. I'm going with altitude here.
Let's go with the clip for that, and then you can take it away on who are the traffickers and victims.
Thank you.
Snapchat is one of the biggest places where they're hanging out now. The perpetrators, the traffickers.
Okay, we've just been discussing how trafficking involves recruitment, transportation, and harboring of persons, for the purpose of exploitation. I've heard a lot of these terms in the last few months researching. I've heard the word stables, Romeo pimps, branding, honeymoon stage. I want to know, who are these traffickers and what's their MO? How are they recruiting? We'll start with Sandra.
If you would have asked this question 2 years ago, you'd probably have a different answer. But now, just like anyone can be a victim, nowadays anyone can be a trafficker. So which is sad. But you have anywhere from your typical, what we know as pimps, can be a trafficker. Neighbors and friends or relatives can take advantage and exploit children. They can be traffickers. You have labor recruiters who recruit people who come over and do agricultural work, they can be traffickers. You have regular criminals that, used to deal with, drugs or guns or robberies, any other type of crime, and then they realize that, hey, we can exploit humans and make a whole lot more money. We can exploit kids and boys and girls and make more money and have a longer use of that person versus, selling drugs and guns. It's only once. But, as we only get selling a human, you can do that multiple times, many, many times a day. Gangs have learned that a way to make money, because in gangs you rise in the ranks with the more money that they're able to bring in. So gangs have turned to trafficking. Businesses, small contractors, they also can be traffickers. So it's not as black and white as it used to be. It's not as simple to pick out the trafficker as it used to be, unfortunately.
Kathy?
Sandra, I've seen where some of these we always see in every city. As you're getting off the expressway, the guy standing there with the cardboard sign that says, I'm homeless, please help. And that many of those are actually controlled by traffickers. Have you seen that?
Yes, absolutely. There's the two types. You have the beggars that are standing outside, panhandling. Some of them are controlled by traffickers. They have to have a quota for the day. And then you have the door-to-door salespeople. So the kids that sell magazines and things like candy bars or something like that literally go door to door in neighborhoods, and they're controlled, by traffickers. So it truly, it can be anybody.
Wow. Kathy, what do you want to add to that for the Canadian side? I know that panhandling has moved up the mountain in Hamilton. I don't know if you've noticed, but it's right around the corner from my house. It used to be downtown.
It does kind of throw us for a loop when we see them come up the mountain. But honestly, for traffickers, for the panhandling guys, most of the people we see in the city as police officers, we kind of know our regulars, and we know we have a lot of people with mental health and the usual ones who are on the corner with their empty, Tim's cups, walking into traffic and things like that. We haven't had, to be honest with you, the traffickers that we're dealing with, I think that would be kind of too much work, and they're not going to see a lot of money, because I don't see, when I'm traveling back and forth to work through the city, because I live in the city I work in, I don't see a lot of people, handing them money, right?
No.
So I don't think that's our biggest problem. Like 90% of our cases are the sexual exploitation. And when Sandra says too, you can, the drug traffickers and our guns, we all kind of work out the same office, our two drug teams and our team in the gangs and weapons, and no doubt that the sexual exploitation is a huge financial gain for these traffickers, because like Sandra says, you can sell a girl over and over and over again multiple times in a day, and some of them will make 200,000, 300,000 a year off of one girl, right? Whereas when you're a drug trafficker, you got to kind of invest in getting those drugs, and then you got to sell them, and you sell it and it's gone, right? And getting caught, if you're pulled over in a traffic stop and we have grounds to search a car for any reason, right, and we find the drugs, right? Whereas it's easy to manipulate and threaten a victim who may be in the car that you're trafficking. That unless we may have all the flags there, we can't go and arrest this guy who may be right in front of us until we have that victim willing to come and basically disclose to us, right? We can check on them, try and build rapport, but yeah, they definitely. That's probably now they're realizing is just how lucrative it is, right? And it just it floors you for the amount of money that these guys can make off these victims. But definitely, the panhandling we're not seeing. We have had a major labor one, but it was about 8 or 9 years ago. It was probably the biggest one in Canada, where they had some Hungarian men brought here and ended up slave labor, right? They were working at a construction company that this group owned, and basically like working them from night till day and keeping them locked in this probably like $1 million+ home in the basement. And nobody knew the wiser really until one of them kind of made his way out and was able to get to somebody for help, and it broke it wide open. But majority, like I could say, probably 95-90% of our cases are the sexual exploitation, because that's definitely where the money is, unfortunately.
Yeah, because you can keep, like Sandra said, you can continually sell them, and you don't have to hire anybody. You're not paying anyone off. You can do this on your own. It's so different from drug trafficking, where there's a lot of trust issues and transportation. Karina, you often do videos about this, and tell us a little bit how you got involved before we keep moving, because I don't want to have you in the dark there.
Oh, no. I used to teach modeling and acting, and I was working with a lot of teenagers who were looking to feel pretty and make money. And it just so happened that lined up with perfect targets for the human trafficking industry. And as I learned more about it, I realized just how vulnerable even the best community kid was, to just fall prey to that. And so it was that, and watching a documentary and then connecting with Erase, and it's just kind of been a windfall since then.
Oh, your videos are so inspiring, and they're so incredible. You have such amazing energy when you're there. Your passion comes through all the time. Karina, what are you doing? You just posted something. You're doing a new way to bring awareness. And did I see a white gown on that post?
Yeah, so it was such a heavy topic, to bring up human trafficking. It's hard, and especially with a younger crowd who needs to hear the discussion. So I try to come up with ways that make the conversation easier, not necessarily fun, but so this year I'm doing a half marathon in a long white wedding dress covered in names of people who also agree human trafficking is wrong. It's a conversation piece. It gets people talking.
Yes. I think it's fantastic. It's a great way of breaking that tension, because nobody wants to talk about it. They think, okay, it's that old age thing. I don't talk about it. It's not happening here. It doesn't happen to me. And we all know that that's not true. I think it's fantastic what you're doing, and I want to participate and support you in that cause as well. Kathy and I will be right behind you, but not in white dresses, right, Kathy? We'll just forego that one.
Over, but
I might forego the marathon too. Just be there.
Yeah.
But I think it's fantastic. Please send me that link in Messenger, because I do want to support you. Okay. We're missing Candace. I don't know if she got dropped off, because I did see someone. But if you're listening, Candace, please call in 213-943-3355 and press 1, and we'll put you on there. I just need your area code. Anyone else who's on the board, you're listening to Talk is Cheap. And we are focusing on human trafficking, which is a huge crime internationally right now. Where are we at, Mr. Producer? Okay, we're down to, Doc, are you next? It's hard to manage a lot of people, so we're trying to keep this as smooth as possible. Okay. You've got the mic there.
1/3 of the teen runaways who end up living on the streets will be lured toward prostitution within 48 hours of leaving home.
That's pretty sobering thought, that a runaway is going to be trafficked within 48 hours of living on the street. But we've got these victims out there. We've got these kids. How can the general public, Sandra, maybe you could tell me, how, as a nobody who's walking around the streets, how can I recognize a victim of human trafficking? Is there anything I can do, anything I can learn so that I can recognize these victims?
You know, it's a mixture of things. It's things that kind of stand out that just doesn't seem right. You know, sometimes it could be, you know, when a person is trafficked, there are very strict rules that a girl or a guy has to follow by their trafficker. You know, they can't make eye contact with anybody else. You know, they can't speak unless, you know, they get approval from their trafficker. So on the flip side, as an everyday person, you know, if you recognize someone, say as a first responder, you know, if you have someone that isn't answering your questions when you're asking simple medical questions, if they're looking to somebody else to answer for them, you know, that's a little unusual. You know, if you see someone that is in it, say like you're at a 7-Eleven or a convenience store, and there's somebody there and they ask you, you know, what town is this? You know, I'm not sure what town this is. You know, they don't know where they're at. They don't know what the date is. They don't know, you know, what day of the week it is. They may not recognize where they are. They may be dressed inappropriately. A lot of times, you know, in the middle of winter time, you may see some, you know, a young girl or a young guy that are not dressed for the weather. So it's a combination of a lot of these different things that, you know, something's just not right. You know, and a lot of times, you know, your gut is always right. And if something doesn't seem right, that's, you know, when you should reach out and call somebody and just say, hey, I just saw this person, something doesn't seem right. Can you check it out?
Makes sense. Hey, Steve, when you were on the fire department as a first responder, did you see these types of these situations? Did you see these kids and wonder, hey, what's up with them?
Yeah, unfortunately, absolutely we did. And, you know, you just thought that maybe it was a behavioral issue, or they were just shy, didn't want to get involved in anything. You know, these are all, as we learn now, signs that maybe something else was going on and we should have investigated more. But there's some really good points that was just brought up on what to look for. And to get the word out, you know, we need to really educate the rest of the fire service, EMS, and everybody who comes into contact with people, because we can get into places that law enforcement might not be able to get into. If there's a fire next door in a building and we're doing searches throughout, you know, we're coming into places where people don't expect us to be, you know, and we may be able to pick something up.
Exactly.
Yeah,
you don't need a warrant. You don't need a warrant to go in.
No, we don't.
No.
Our warrant is a wisp of smoke.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That is incredible.
To Steve's point, I mean, that's what I love about first responders, in the sense that they are definitely in a position to notice things. You know, if they go into a hotel room to say there's an overdose, you know, and they're going to there to help someone, and you know, if they look around, they may notice, hey, there's a lot of condoms, there's lubricants, there's things that shouldn't be there. There's, you know, 5 or 6 girls in one room. You know, there's male clothing but not men. You know, they will pick up. If they know the signs, they'll see things. They'll just kind of jump out at them as to something's not right. And they're in a perfect position, like you were saying, Steve, to see those things, because, you know, they're not going to be on defense. They're not going to be, you know, if you're a police officer, they're going to act a certain way. But from you, they're going to, you know, they're not going to be as guarded.
That's a great point. That's true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. All right, Amelia, you got the next question.
Okay, this one, when I was thinking about it, and all of of course, I've watched I Am Jane Doe a million times, and all the other great documentaries that are out there. We all live in a community. We shop there. We stay at hotels. We've even seen on different parts on the internet, and I know, Kathy, you've posted this before too, where you take photographs of the inside of the hotel and you can post them up and with the name, so that you can pick up on that with the photos of the victims. we're in our communities, we're walking around. We're so into our technology, we're not paying attention to everything around us. So it's important to be more observant. What I'd like to know is how can the community assist? And when does it become too dangerous to get involved? Because some people get into that vigilante kind of thing, right? Where, I'm going to take them out. And that's not such a good idea. Am I correct, Kathy? Seriously.
Yeah, we definitely don't recommend it because we're finding more. Obviously, we have reports, and again, we're not the U.S. and no dig on your gun laws down there, but a lot of times you don't know what these guys are carrying, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I'm not saying anything. That's a whole other show.
But we're starting to get more kind of like anonymous tips, Crime Stoppers information that we get where we know somebody may have been stopped, like in a vehicle, like a victim may have been with her trafficker in a vehicle, and information comes in later that there's little traps in the car and that the guy's known to carry a gun, right? Knives are big up here and they're nice and quiet and they're quick, so we don't ever recommend people taking the law into their own hands and confronting the trafficker who may be, in the presence of a victim. But when you say, like, where are they? If you're working in a restaurant, you may see a victim come in. If you're, and I'd like to know, I don't know what the extent of their training is, too, with not even just first responders, but again, paramedics who, come into contact, but also medical, personnel in emergency rooms, right, where they have the opportunity to be alone with a person, to look for signs of abuse, to look for branding and tattoos. There's no particular, I'm a human trafficking victim tattoo kind of thing that we have out there, but there are various questionable tattoos that could be a good sign for people to look for. But we always recommend, if you think it's urgent, like you think the person is in dire, grave danger immediately, you call 911. If you think there's information that if you are hotel staff or you work in the restaurant in the hotel, that you could put in a Crime Stoppers tip or phone with some information, right, that we can follow up on. Because with Crime Stopper tips and information there, that gives us a lot of weight when we write warrants for houses, cars, things like that for the accused. So, we need people to be aware, like you said, somebody who's not making eye contact and who may look malnourished or doesn't speak for themselves. The other person always answers. They don't have their ID on them. Things to look for. And we tell our officers that as well. Even as first responders, we still have to train and retrain our officers that, you may be going to a noise complaint or you may be going to a theft from a drugstore. And that girl or that victim may be doing the theft and there may be more to it and the reason why she's doing that theft, right? So there's lots of things to kind of look for and you're going to find it in different areas. So, yeah, first responders, we get that opportunity, but I know people in the community, how many people go and get their nails done, Amelia, right? Like when the little shop you go to get your nails done, there may be the girl doing your nails, may be a victim, right?
Yeah, I always have my eyes
you go to
open.
hand them your tip or the payment. Yeah, someone comes up behind them to take that tip that you're just about to hand over, things like that. Like it can be anywhere, right? So we encourage even the Johns, though it's illegal to purchase up here. I think, recently we've been getting some Crime Stoppers where you're looking at the details in the Crime Stopper that they're suspicious of some activity in a hotel room. And I'm like, well, the only way you would know that is if you were a customer, right? But we appreciate that they actually had, the conscience to submit that information to the police so that we can follow up on it.
Better to be nothing than to ignore it and it be something, right? I know with the nail salons, definitely. And I know in our city we had that issue with the massage parlor. And what I've noticed as well, and I want to bring this in because we're moving so fast. I know nurses who work in emergency departments in our city where Kathy and I live, and I know that there are women going in, young girls going in, having babies, and then they go missing during the night, but the baby still remains at the hospital. So I know that there is...
We have reports of...
I was told by a nurse that I know that she has seen this a few times. I don't know if you've heard I'm going to talk to her anyways. I'm going to talk to you about that on the side. But so that for her to know that and to see that must mean that they are being trained to look for these problems. They're not closing their eyes to it. And it's dangerous for them too, because when it's in the middle of the night, there's not much security around. So it's like, how do you, what would you say to a nurse who's in that situation?
Well, every hospital in this city has security 24/7, right?
Yeah.
I haven't, you obviously have a different experience there. I haven't heard of that. I know if there's a young person coming in and giving birth to someone and then that person takes off, I know that, Children's Aid gets called immediately. Not sure if that's, I don't know, because most of these traffickers are not going to allow their sex trade workers even to get pregnant, to be honest with you, right? Because that's going to come back on how many clients they're going to get and how much money they're going to lose, right? Because whether or not they make them work through that pregnancy, but it's, I go through numerous ads daily, like on multiple escort sites. We're always like perusing through them, and I've seen maybe 1-2% of the thousands of ads I've seen where it's an actual person who's pregnant who's advertising sexual services. So if that's a situation, maybe that's isolated for her. I'm not sure, but obviously if there's other information, and I'd love for her to forward it to us, but it hasn't come across here as that type of situation.
I'll talk to her. It freaked her out, and she's pretty young.
Yeah. I spent 35 years as a registered nurse, and I still stay in contact with a lot of nurses. And I've heard of this happening in a hospital here in the Chicago area where especially a young girl will go in to deliver the baby and then disappear. Most cases, they're caught before they leave the hospital, but they are trying to get out, and they are panic-stricken when they get caught because they know their pimp is going to just raise holy hell. But it is becoming more and more prominent because of the whole human trafficking is growing so fast.
Are we going into now and talking about this, Kathy? Is that started?
I'm sorry, are we going where? You cut out, sorry.
Into schools now and talking about this. Is it going into the curriculum?
It's not specifically in their curriculum. Like you already, you would know that they're changing, or they're trying to, because of the change in governments, they're trying to change the sex education curriculum.
Yeah.
But we are trying our best, like myself and Candace, we have met with both the public board and the separate school board, the Catholic board, and they seem to be on board with us coming in that we'd like to do training for the staff, like do a professional development day when they have their training to come in and present to them. But I've done a handful of schools in the city of Hamilton because, most of the high schools have a law class, and a lot of them are touching on it. So, like my kids' school, obviously they know me. The teachers have requested that I've gone in to talk to them. We're also speaking to staff, who are in contact with a lot of kids and the kids trust them, like the Boys and Girls Club, the Kiwanis Boys and Girls. We've been there. Our John Howard Society, the ones that have programs for youth who are who have run away or, have been kicked out of their homes or have addictions. We've been going around to the staffs there because they'll see the signs and they're with a more vulnerable group. But yeah, our goal is to, and we're still it's not a losing battle, but we're still trying to make headway because, like I said, I would like to get into every school in the city, starting from grade 7. Minimal grade 7 and up. We are going to try in February to hold like an information session probably at a local college, like at Mohawk. And I would hope that we can maybe send out something to parents, like if we went to every school and had them notify parents to say, hey, there's going to be a public forum on human trafficking in our community. Come on out And, hopefully you'll come and see the presentations and the speakers. And then at that point we would say, now that you parents are aware, we would like to come into your schools and do the same thing and educate your kids. Because I know some will be like, oh, no, never. Some may not like the topic or, because we try and keep it real. We don't sugarcoat anything. We want them to know how bad it can really be. So, we don't want to offend people, but again, I'm not going to sit here and say, well, it could be this. No, it needs to be a good slap in the face is what I think they need. And that's what we're hoping to do. So I think we're looking at February as a possible date where Candace and I and a few other people can do some presentations where we can get, high school age parents, grade, middle school parents out to listen and see our presentations and educate them that way. And then hopefully the parents will say, yeah, this needs to be in our schools, right? So
exactly.
We keep working
That's
at it.
Fantastic. Let me know if you need any help with any of the distribution of the information or postings. Let me know. I'd love to do that for you. Okay. Sandra.
We had a couple of lunch and learns, so that's good.
Yeah, I'll be there. You just tell me. I will be there. Sandra, I just want to ask you quickly, because I know that everybody's bio is on the event page, and that's why we haven't gotten in too much. But Sandra, please tell us how you started Help Erase and why.
Actually, I came in probably about a month after Erase actually stood up. There was another nonprofit that I was working with, and they had a different focus, and a group of people had come together, a group of people that had worked together for years in the either federal service or some type of government service, and they had traveled abroad a lot, and they saw what human trafficking was happening in other countries, and they saw it slowly developing here in the U.S. compared to what it was overseas, and they felt they needed to do something. So they stood up the race, and we looked at the different areas that needed focus. And so we do a little bit about, education. We focus on, what happens when a victim is recovered, and then how to help the victim after they've been recovered. So like I said, I came in about a month after we stood up, and it's been nonstop for the past 3 years since joining them. And it's an amazing group of people, dedicated people. We've grown as far as our area of focus. After being in this for a short period of time, it was interesting because my husband's a firefighter, and a lot of my friends are in law enforcement. And I was finding that, in trying to help a victim, I would turn to law enforcement, and I wasn't getting the response that I would have thought I would have gotten. And knowing them personally, I was like, this doesn't make sense, because these people are the most kindest, big-hearted, intelligent people that I know, and why don't they know about human trafficking? So from there, I learned more that, here in the States, it's not taught in the majority of academies, police academies, and if it is, it's a small section, maybe a 40-minute online section. And the same with first responders. It's more so now. It's becoming part of the curriculum, but for the most part, they're unaware. So that's when we kind of shifted our focus and started working with training law enforcement. So we go to different areas that, are looking to create change, and we have these amazing instructors that are retired law enforcement, and they help other officers, to see the signs. Because I think Kathy was mentioning how difficult it is, if you're doing a car stop, and unless that victim says, hey, I'm a victim, you're kind of at a loss as to what to do. So that's when we started creating these classes, and the instructors have come up with, ways to help the officers to see things a little bit differently and give them different tools that they can use to take things to the next level to find out if, somebody is a victim. So that's where our focus has been. I love working with this. I can't imagine doing anything else. I used to work in the medical field, and I used to work with cancer patients, and you accept that there are some things that are out of your control. And working with trafficking, as Karina has said many times, this is a preventable problem. This is something we can prevent and something we can address. So that's where I feel like, I want to be put out of a job. Like, I want to be to a point where, we don't need nonprofits to do this. If there's enough awareness, if there's enough prevention, if there's enough, first responders, law enforcement, if they're aware of this, prosecutors are aware of how to prosecute, judges are aware of the situations, we can eventually, maybe not in our lifetimes, but get to a point where this is not a health crisis.
Okay. What kind of services? I mean, I know we've been talking for a while, and we had a really nice discussion a few months back. I adore Sandra. She knows that, and everything she does. Can you tell our audience, everyone who's listening at home, and for those who think they might know someone who is a victim, what kind of services do you provide, and how can they reach you?
Sure. What we do is we provide services on many different levels. The first one is we start with case management. If a survivor has been recovered by law enforcement, or if they've escaped, they can call us. We have an 800 number, which I'll give you in a minute. And we can just start from simple things, because people would be amazed when a victim is recovered. They either they've been caught in a sting where they've been picked up by police and they've been identified as a victim, or they literally escaped from the trafficker. So when that happens, generally they are wearing either no clothes or clothes that are small lingerie type clothes. They don't have shoes. They literally do not have clothes. So, we help collect items and provide to law enforcement and to different people that may need them, actual just simple things, clothing, toiletries. It starts that small. And then from there, we help people navigate to find health care, mental health care, and then housing. A lot of these victims, going home is not an option, because a lot of times their situation at home is what led them to be vulnerable. So they have no support system. So we help build a support system around them. We work with people from all across the country, and we work with other nonprofits. We work with victim assistance from other agencies, and together we help create a support system for them. As far as services, we help with if someone has a record due to why they're being trafficked. We help them find legal services that can help them with those issues, whether it's something they currently have to face in court or whether it's something that they want to get expunged from their record. And it's a long-term process. It's something that you want to stay connected to the survivors that you're working with, because again, you become their support system. You and the people that you bring to with you. We try to help them, whatever their needs are and whatever age they are. Our name is Erase Child Trafficking, but a lot of the people that we see are in that age bracket of 18 to 24, where there are not social services for them. Mm-hmm. Some states you can get social services up to 21, but in most states, the minute you turn 18, there's no available resources for you, unless you either have a drug addiction or a child. Then you're allowed a little bit more services, but there's not a lot out there for you. So that's where we have to rely on the community to help with different things that we're not able to provide to help survivors.
Yes, of course. It adds up. Kathy, I would like to do a Want Your Clothing drive. Do I contact Candace for that?
There's numerous, just to kind of piggyback on Sandra there with regards to, so it's I want to say it's not different, but so with the Hamilton Police, if we come across the victim, we have our victim services. So if we realize, like Sandra said, sometimes all they have are, the lingerie. They're not dressed appropriate for the weather. So we have, like a package that we can grab from victim services. So if there's an officer with someone at a hotel, we can run it out or get someone else, and it'll have like a house coat. It'll have a toothbrush, deodorant. We have things, if they need any kind of item that they need, we can bring it to them immediately. And victim services will they kind of take over the handling of the victim and get them to. We work on getting them into a place of safety immediately, and then there are other services available that victim services will take on. Especially if there's an arrest, then we kind of work on dealing with the accused and doing the paper and preparing for court. We all have specialized crowns now in every area of Ontario that strictly deal with human trafficking prosecutions. And I guess Candace hasn't, you weren't able to connect with Candace. She's not on, right?
No, I wasn't. No.
So what's been developed is through the YMCA, Candace is what's called a youth in transition worker, and they'll, because like Sandra said, once you hit that 18 mark, right, they're kind of lost in the wind. But Candace as a youth in transition worker, basically it's an anti-human trafficking initiative that provides primary client contact for youth who are survivors. They help navigate, basically through the system, interacting with us. So Candace currently has our golden horseshoe. She has a huge area to cover, and she's probably got over 50 clients. And a lot of those clients haven't come through us. So a lot of them have been given support and help, but haven't come through the law enforcement, and they're not being pressured to. But me and Candace work closely that if a victim, if they have addiction issues that need to be dealt with or mental health issues that need to be dealt with, we make sure that they're safe and that they're on the road to recovery. They've been able to exit, and then we hope, our goal is that when they're stronger, when they're ready to possibly go after their trafficker criminally, then Candace can, we'll work together in getting that person, in for interviews, and we take over that part. We also have in Hamilton, we have an anti-human trafficking coalition. So a lot of the organizations that deal with homelessness, with shelters, with everything like that, we've actually put together a guide, and it's a guide for supporting trafficked persons, and it's online and it's available. It has an endless amount of resources for victims, and it kind of works like every community service in Hamilton is getting, has access to it or has one, and it basically helps them walk through the process too of who to call, what to do, things like that, so that nobody's kind of left hanging in the wind, and we don't lose a victim who ends up, trafficked again in the future, kind of thing. So we do have a lot of, we've moved forward with a lot of services and a lot of support, not only from law enforcement but from the services and just making sure they're safe and getting them rescued. So Candace has a really good job, a really important job. Unfortunately, she's one person, and hopefully they'll be able to get more staff. But like Sandra says, hopefully we'll all be not unemployed, but working in different areas because we won't.
I understand.
That's going to be a long time coming. So I can send you that information, Amelia, if you want to.
Yes, please, and I'll post it
later.
I'll post it on the site because I want to know how I can help as just someone in the community. What can I give? Can I donate things for the toiletries? Can I help in that way? I'm sure a lot of people are thinking
I know that someone asked about it, and I know that we have a really good supply. But I know that even just some of the shelters within the city could use it because, if we do have to, send a victim to a local shelter, the extra clothing and toiletries and things like that would always help. So we always ask people to donate to our local shelters, women and children's shelters, things like that.
That's usually what I do with my clothes too. There's so many times a girl goes shopping, she buys things, she doesn't wear them, you have them in your closet. Resource and take a look, Google and look for shelters in your area and drop off the clothes there, especially for the women who are getting back out there in the workforce. They need a wardrobe to start out, so don't dismiss that jacket and skirt. drop it off there. Thank you for all that information. Now, I keep taking over and Doc has to come in, but I do have one more thing that I have to do. I admire all of you, and I thank you all for being here. Now, Steve, you know
Yes.
now that Sandra's in New York. So you're going to have to come together and meet. And I would love it if you collaborated and worked her program into your public speaking.
Absolutely.
I'm talking to you like a boss. one drink with you, and I think I can do anything.
That's okay. I'd be more than willing to help. I see so much potential on getting information out. We have numerous firefighter training shows and educational forums that really we need to work together to get this information out to every one of them. Recognizing the signs and different things that may be going on and what we could do about them and who to call and move that along. Because the more eyes, the better, right?
Exactly. Perfect.
Yes. Can I tell you a quick story on how?
Of course you can.
People can help. So I mentioned my husband's a firefighter, and he's very supportive. And on Facebook, anything we post, he always shares. And I live here, probably 40 miles near Atlantic City, where there's casinos. And one of his coworkers, who's also a firefighter, was down in Atlantic City, and because of them, his coworkers constantly seeing the Facebook stuff with about human trafficking, one of the firefighters had actually recognized the situation. There was a girl in the middle of winter not wearing appropriate clothing. She was very upset. They asked her some questions. She wasn't responding as one would expect. And then with a little bit more questioning, they realized that she was running from her trafficker. And, him and his wife, they took her to a safe place, and then they gave us a call, and then, of course, we called law enforcement. But it was something that simple as just, sharing information and recognizing the signs. Karina always says, it's talking to your circle of people, and I'll let her talk more about that. But it's just letting people know who would not normally know, just like you're doing with this show.
I wish we didn't have to do this, but I can tell you it takes me a good year before I can start again. It's so overwhelming and it's so hard. I understand that people don't want to discuss it, and I often hear when I'm getting my nails done, actually, I hear the ladies that work there will say to me, well, I thought that was just in Malaysia. Well, I thought that was just in United States. It's constant, and without awareness, you really can't. Uneducated, what are you going to do? So it's important, and that what was most important for me tonight was that this panel was a balance of American and Canadian. Although Kathy's got that, she's the heavyweight here because I'm just the host. So it was very important to me that both countries were represented. We share a border. A lot of our victims are crossing that border.
Mm-hmm.
So
we definitely share the problem.
Yeah.
And by sharing the problem, we have to find a joint solution, or we're not going to be able to end human trafficking.
Kathy, there is I'm not going to talk after this, Doc, I promise. Kathy, there is
That's okay.
I believe it was Detective Martin, I believe it was, who discussed the 400 series highway across. Do you want to tell our audience about that? Because a lot of people are shocked when I mention it.
What do you mean, like how far it goes and how?
And the hotels and the, yeah.
Yeah, well, that highway is highly accessible, right, across the province, right, like from Windsor to Niagara Falls, so all the border towns, right through into Quebec and Montreal. So we get a lot of that traffic because Hamilton's between Niagara Falls and Toronto. But I mean, like you said, like, you know, they're in rental cars or they're in regular cars, and they're just going town to town to town. Like when I think it was Sandra mentioned earlier, when someone says they don't even know what city they're in, it's very true, right? Because there's trauma as well, and you know, nights turn into days and days turn into night, and half time they can't tell where they are. But the highways give it a lot. We're finding a lot of them are moving north. So the 401 kind of runs east-west across our province, and then.
Oh, we lost Kathy. We'll take her back. Well, no, I'm not going to take her back. We'll get her to call back in. Sandra, do you want to add to that till she comes back?
Sure. No, I was going to say it's interesting because literally last week we were up in Plattsburgh, New York, doing a training, and I think it's about 40 minutes south of Montreal. And in the county that we were in, they have 2 border crossings. And, you know, they're in a unique situation because their town has trafficking, but then they're a corridor for trafficking from victims coming from Montreal to New York for sexual exploitation. So they have to be aware of it on both sides. And that's where I think, you know, hearing what Kathy was saying, it sounds like they're actually a little bit ahead of us as far as communicating with agencies among each other. But it would be great to have, you know, agencies start talking more across the border.
Absolutely. Especially border patrols right there. They can communicate with either side of the border. They have that access. They should have the training.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had, last year we were at St. Regis Mohawk Tribe, which technically sits in the U.S. and Ontario and Quebec, I think it is. My geography is horrible, so I apologize.
No, you're right. You got it.
Okay. So we did a class there, and we had a lot of Border Patrol come. And it was interesting because it's the same thing. They have their own trafficking, but then they also have people coming from all different areas. So you have to really be aware of what's going on. And that's where agencies across the border need to communicate back and forth. And, you know, the trends, there's a couple of things that Kathy has said, that the trends are different than what we're seeing, and I'm sure vice versa. If law enforcement got together and talked, say, hey, what are you seeing? You know, what are we seeing? And maybe we could, you know, do a little bit more.
Kathy, we got you back.
Sorry, I think I dropped off. Sorry. Maybe this app only allows a certain amount of time.
Don't worry.
So I'm sorry, I don't even know what the last thing I said.
Okay, we were just talking. Sandra took over for you there. She was just talking about about the highways and how, you know, you're working together as they go city to city, and how these victims don't know where they are. And that's true, between the trauma and if there's any drugs involved, and then the fear. A lot of times they're threatened, are they not, that their families will be hurt if they speak up? Is that how they keep them controlled?
Yes, that's a big part of it, right? One of the questions that, you know, sometimes people can ask victims are, do they hold their identification? That's a criminal offense, right? Is withholding their documents, whether it's a driver's license or a health card or a passport. Because what's the most important thing on some of these identification, usually name, address, date of birth, phone, so they find out everything about them right up front. And, you know, well, during that kind of luring stage where they get to know their victim and they get to know, you know, things about them, like their family and who, you know, I love my sister so much, or my dog, oh my God, I can't live without my dog. And then next thing you know, it's like, well, if you don't do this for me, I'm going to go to your house. I'm going to kill your dog. I'm going to beat up your sister. You know, I'm going to show them pictures I took of you and that you're doing this. And, you know, like there's a lot of that exploitation and that extortion, and the threats are a huge thing. Almost every case we have, there's always threatening involved.
That's how they're controlling them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the control, like when they eat, okay, and when they sleep. You know, like we have victims who, you know, they didn't sleep for 12 hours straight. They had 4 or 5, 6 back-to-back dates booked, and they weren't allowed to sleep until they made a certain amount of money, right? Yeah. So, I mean, it can be sleep deprivation, food, Like even medical services. Well, no, I'm not taking you to the hospital until I got 2 more dates lined up, then we'll go. Kind of thing. So threatening, the control and the threats are huge. That's a big part of the exploitation factor.
A lot of times they don't even see medical because they don't want the attention drawn on to them. Now, I know that there's been a lot of, and I really want to ask you this question because we live in the same city. There's been a lot of where they're going in to the malls and looking for potential victims there.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's like the vulnerability in anywhere where there's a lack of supervision, right? And malls are big because what do you see when you go to the malls? You see a group of girls, usually. And I'm sorry, I speak from experience because 90% of our victims are females and the majority of the traffickers are males. Mind you, there are females. But, like they're looking at that pair of shoes and then they overhear someone say, oh, I can't get that. It costs too much and I don't have the money, or my parents won't give me the money. They won't give me an allowance or things like that, right? So it's a lot of kind of watching, luring, and grooming. Again, like where, they could come up behind a girl like that and say, oh, those would look great on you. But I can't afford them. Okay, well, how about I buy them for you? Or, because a lot of the kids will take, like you may have a kid from a middle-class family whose parents have been able to provide, but that those extra things, that are more expensive, that, it's not like they're being deprived and they're not being neglected. No. It's just, it's common sense. This is what we can afford. And you'll hear kids today, right, because a lot of kids kind of have this entitlement, right, that, they got to have the best of everything. They got to have what's new. They got to have that new Xbox, that PS4. And, and online, a faceless friend, starts chatting you up, and next thing you know, they can purchase it for you and meet up, and then, it just kind of flows from there. And then next thing you know, there's a debt. You owe me for that thing I bought you. You owe me for taking you to get your nails done, right? And then that debt list starts. And it'll never, like we've had victims where she worked enough to get a down payment on a condo in like Mississauga, which is highly expensive. And she gets the down payment. He moves in, kicks her out, and says, when you give me another $10,000, I'll let you move back in. And it's like, it's her condo, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, there's exit fees, right, where the trafficker will say, well, you make me so much money, and then that's it. I'll cut you, like, you're gone, you're done, I'm done with you, and it'll all be over. And then they make that money, and then it's like, oh, did I say $20,000? No, it's $40,000. Once you
they're not going to
never
let
ends.
go.
There's
always that. You're making them money.
And the malls, easy pickings, right? Because a lot of kids go to the malls on their own, right, at an early age, right? People let their 12, 13, 14-year-olds go with a group of friends, and they're easy to kind of just watch and listen, and you'll be able to find what it is that can needle your way into that person's life, right?
Okay. Kathy, what's the biggest for social media for under 16 with these traffickers?
Snapchat's big for us. Most kids don't use the Facebook. That's for old people. that's what most of them say. We find with our investigations that the bad people in Hamilton, the bad people tend to use Facebook, whereas the good kids don't. But Snapchat is big. Instagram's not so bad. But the Snapchat makes it a bit harder because a lot of times the pictures and stuff kind of disappear and they're hard to retrieve. Whereas Instagram, like most stuff that's deleted off of phones and computers, our guys can retrieve. But it's that, the kids, the big thing is I have like 500 friends. And it's like, really you don't. But that friend's supposedly friends with these people that I know. So they'll accept the friend requests, right? And then they get chatting, and next it's like, oh, you want to meet in person? And then, they start that grooming on top of it in person and luring, and it just goes from there. But, social media is easy because you don't have supervision, and you could probably talk to most parents today who, one, don't even know what Snapchat is, or two, how to maneuver their way through social media. Like, I have kids in high school, like, turning 18 and 16, and I'm on their accounts. Like, they may say, I'm not allowed to post on their stuff, but I can monitor. And I've had my kids' coaches who say, if you're on my team, I want your social media, and I'll be monitoring what you put out there.
Absolutely.
So, we kind of have that community thing, which is good, but parents need to know, and they need to look at their kids' cell phones and their social media accounts. And, your parent, you're usually paying for those things when kids are young, so you have every right. I tell parents, you're paying for that, so you have every right to go and take a look at what they're posting and who they're talking to, and remind kids that, just because they say they're somebody doesn't always mean that's who you're actually talking to, right? So that's common sense.
Yeah, and communication. You just keep reiterating communicating with
definitely.
your child, being involved in their lives, making sure you know what's going on. Because the minute they're silent, something's hitting. They're hiding something.
Yeah.
There always is. And that's when they're going to be most vulnerable to reach out to someone else.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. If they can't have that communication with their parent and talk about things that they may be embarrassing to the kid, but that's that's too bad. It's things need to be discussed, and I started seeing that when I worked in the child abuse branch, because I worked a lot with the sexual assaults on kids and 10, 9, 11-year-olds who are starting to be sexually active and things like that. So those conversations, and then sorry parents if they're uncomfortable for you, but they need to be had. Right?
Absolutely.
And then part of that is building your child's self-esteem, right? Because that's another vulnerability is where a lot of these girls don't think they're pretty enough, or their boobs aren't big enough, or they're they're a couple pounds overweight or whatever. We have to reinforce to our kids that you're perfect the way you are, and there's nothing wrong with you, right? So don't let anyone tell you differently, and have that self-esteem. Be confident. Be a confident young person growing up in this age, right? This day and age.
Beautifully said. You're a fantastic mom. I'm a witness to that. She has amazing kids. Her husband's okay too, Jerome.
Yeah.
He's okay. Anyways, that is so important. That's where the focus is of self-esteem. You're so right with that. And if that's what's lacking, is we're in a society where we're too busy to be talking to them, but we're choosing that to be too busy. Remember that you chose to be a parent first. So be that parent. Be there for your children. It's so important. And if you can't, find someone. If they don't talk to you, find someone that you trust that can talk to them. I think extracurricular activities is huge, but you need to be present for them as well. You can't just drop them off. Be present in what they're doing and constantly encourage them. Sandra, I wanted to ask you a question. After watching I Am Jane Doe, I did learn from that, like anyone who watches it, that, these victims do come from good families. And what happened? Did you see anything change in the city after Backpage was shut down?
Yes. So we're seeing, it's very slow. We are starting to see some things change. As from a service provider, the one thing I'm seeing is there are more girls that are able to leave, escape from their traffickers, because from what we're seeing is because they're not able to use the online options, that they're going back to the street. And when they're out in the street, they have more of an ability to get away. And then a lot of the younger traffickers, they don't know how to navigate the system without using today's technology. So now you have the trafficker who doesn't know how to make money from exploitation, but yet they still have to support the girl, any drug dependencies that they've caused, now they have to support. So a lot of them are saying, you know what, we can't do this right now. So they let them go. That was kind of like the immediate, we've never been so busy since Backpage is shut down.
Oh my gosh. I thought about that when I saw that. I thought about the victims.
Right. And then but on the other side, it also now makes it more difficult for law enforcement to find them. And also now, because the girls actually are reverting to going back on the street, it creates more dangers for them. So it is shifting, but I don't think it won't be long before there's just another website hosted in another country that takes Backpage's place. I don't think it'll be very long at all.
No. Often what we see and we hear about is women who were young girls when they were being trafficked, and they get into their 20s, and all of a sudden they become a recruiter. Have you ever had one that's come to you for help to get out?
Absolutely. And it's tough. I mean, you got to remember the recruiters and the peer traffickers, they all started out as victims. And a lot of times they have it more difficult because, the trafficker does anything he can do to not be held responsible for any crimes that are committed. So he will put somebody in charge. And, they're very manipulative, and they'll have that one person, well, you're my number one girl, you're special. So you do this for me, and you're my number one. And they give her all the extra attention. But if she doesn't do what he says, then she's the one who gets the most punishment. She's the one who gets beat the most. She's the one who has to work more. Her quota goes up. The price of her dates go down. And that's really difficult. So they're in a very tough situation because, they're getting it from both sides.
Well said. That was important to know, because we're focusing on the younger ones, but these women have been victimized for years, and it can't be easy to reach out because you're told that you're worthless and you're a piece of crap and that this is all you'll ever be. Nobody will ever trust you. Nobody will ever want you. So they break them down to nothing. I can't imagine the strength that it takes to come forward to ask for help. It's got to be really scary for them.
It is. And that's why I love what Karina does with the way her outreach is. We've actually had survivors come forward because of listening to some of the live streams.
Sandra, you just read my next question.
Oh.
I was going to actually, no, I'm glad that you said that. Karina, I wanted to ask you, what is your interaction like with those powerful videos?
I'm sorry, the interaction?
Yes. Do you have interaction from the videos? Like Sandra was saying that they have come forward with you.
Yeah, I don't hear exactly the stories from people that come through Erase, but I have so much passion in listening to people. Like when people ask, like, where do you come up with what you're going to talk about? It's so much hearing what other people's experiences are. It's super easy to assume, like, okay, cops are arresting minors. But then you talk to cops and they're like, well, when they come to us, they tell us they're 18 and they have no ID. And so you go, oh, crap, there's something we're missing. We have to have that conversation. Or somebody else will say, we're arresting them because keeping them safe with us that night is better than any other option. We don't have a bed for them, so this is what we do. And so, it's the listening. I had a friend who, she went into the middle school, and because you have to be cautious of how you say things without parent permission, she just asked the students what they knew. And one girl said, well, somebody messaged me and asked if I wanted to be an escort. And, she was just blown away. Is that human trafficking? And so it's a lot of it is just the listening, that piece of the interaction, so that okay, this is the conversation and this is where it needs to go. These are the pieces that we've been missing out on, because you can talk for a long time about something until you realize, oh, I missed the mark completely. I'm talking about something they don't even care about, and this is their real pain point.
So when you go out there and you do that, first of all, everybody can find you on Facebook. Karina Steer, and her videos are so incredible, so energetic, so informative. Please follow her. You're on all the time. How do you have to prep yourself before you go on? I mean, you're dealing with a lot of negative energy and information before you go out there. How do you choose what you're going to speak about?
Sandy and I spend a lot of time kind of figuring out what current, what's in the news, what's on our hearts. I mean, it's crazy. A lot of times we will connect and we'll both be thinking about the same thing that is kind of totally off topic, or she's super awesome because I have a loud mouth and I say things that most people don't want me to say. And she's
That's okay.
with it
We're all like
because
that here. You're in perfect company. Don't worry.
Yay! And so it's those kind of things, and it's just I get to see so much progress. You know, when you just see how the awareness is spreading, and people who are being honest about their struggle. You know, it's not just like, hey, we're okay, statistics look good. And when people are like, no, the statistics aren't good, we don't know how to do what we're doing, help us. Like, to me, I get so much joy out of somebody coming forward like that and knowing that it sucks right now, but now it's like the bandage is pulled off and we could do something about it. And so, yeah, before I speak, you know, I am going through some websites, gathering some statistics, talking to people, you know, knowing what their insight is. But it's and then just a lot of heart-to-hearts with Sandy. We get on a phone call that lasts at least 3 hours.
Yeah, I've been there. I've been on that phone call. What I love about you is when you're out there on your videos, it's like you're sitting across from me and you're talking only to me. So I want to thank you for that, because I do have, you know, the younger girls of my life watching you as well. I think it's really important what you do, and I just want to thank you for that. I'm glad that you were able to make it here tonight. And if you ever want to do a podcast, I'd love to have you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to be quiet now because I've been saying that for the last half hour, and let Doc come back if he's still with us, unless he's left me for good. Doc, you there?
Approximately 23% of survivors have attempted suicide, compared to only 3% of the general population.
And that's a scary statistic, that so many of them attempt suicide. If you come across something that you think might be human trafficking, go to the powerofhopefoundation.org website, and you'll find all of the contact numbers for groups like Polaris, Canadian Crime Stoppers, and the Be Free text line in the United States. So you can find these, as well as the suicide prevention numbers, both in Canada and the United States, because so many of these people are prone to suicide. Kathy, I have a question for you. Canada started the Canadian Centre to End Human Trafficking in Toronto, and it's due to launch in the fall of 2018. Is it open?
I don't think so. I know that they're bringing forth the national hotline, because we work off Chrysalis, I think, one of the 1-800 numbers, but I don't believe it's open yet.
Okay,
so,
just curious.
Yeah,
all right.
I know the. Go ahead.
Sandy, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
You there? All right.
Yes.
I just made you Queen of the United States. You can make one declaration that would help end human trafficking. What would you have the power to change? What would you change if you could?
That's a great question. Honestly, I would change, if I could be king for a day, I would help empower families to raise healthier kids, because everything, whether it's trafficking, the trafficker, the victim, everything starts at home. So I would want to find ways to help empower families to have healthier relationships within their family.
Well, I love that answer. All right, Kathy, you're Queen of Canada for a day. What are you going to change? What's the one thing you're going to do?
She's Queen 365 days a year in my book.
I don't know. I kind of, maybe because I'm jaded, being like in the line of work I've been doing for the last 20 plus years, that my brother-in-law always used to kid me we'd have discussions. He always said he'd make me the Minister of Justice, because I don't think our laws and our punishments are anywhere near where they should be in this country. I think we're too lax. We don't send a message to those really bad offenders. Because if you guys were to hear what we get for sentencing up here, you'd probably laugh. It's sad, because when I know that a trafficker or someone who abuses children, is out in 2, maybe 3, 4 years, maybe we're still fighting to get double digits. So if I was king for a day or queen for a day, definitely the sentencing and the laws would change so that those kind of people who are found guilty of these offenses would probably never see the light of day. Probably debate on capital punishment coming back too. So, but yeah,
I won't say we haven't had that conversation, because we have. But yeah, I'm with you 120%.
I find it hard on the victims. As law enforcement and all the work we have to do to have a good case, to bring someone to trial, and to see time and time again our victims almost be re-victimized because the process takes too long. Like, it can take a year or 2 years before we're at trial because there's just too much garbage going on in between. I would make sure there's an end to that, because it's hard enough for them to come forward and provide disclosure and support charges, but when they have to do it 2, 3 more times, to sit on the stand and face their offender and relive that horrible nightmare, it just breaks my heart, and I can't blame people when they say, forget it, I want nothing to do with the process. So that needs to change.
That's where the term "a victim for life" comes in. A lot of people say she was a victim of. No, it's not past tense. You will always be a victim of that. It affects your entire life, not just the one day that it happened. So I'd like to see that change. Yeah. But yeah, and I'd like to see them in shackles on the link cleaning up. But that's just me.
Yeah.
I know Kathy would be there to supervise.
With the shotgun in my hand to make sure nobody
Sure. I can see it. As a psychic, I already see the vision.
Can I ask Kathy a question?
Of course you can. I'm answering for her. Kathy, could she ask you a question?
Kathy, I just recently, our instructor was telling me about a case from Canada that I just recently started learning about. It was called Operation Hellbinder. Are you familiar with that?
I don't think I'm familiar with it. No. Do we know where it happened, or?
It was called North Preston's Finest.
Oh yeah, East Coast. Yeah. There's a large gang out Nova Scotia way. I actually did a training course at the Canadian Police College. It's part of the Human Trafficking, and one of the officers, who's RCMP, which is our federal police service, he did a presentation, and that's where I first heard about them. And I know we've had a few of them come through in Toronto, and it's quite the large project, because I think it was one of the first that did wiretaps across numerous provinces. But I'm not sure of the outcome. I don't know if it's even finished yet. But that's opened my eyes huge about the problem out there in that gang. They're pretty, they almost rival our Hells Angels up here. They almost put them to shame.
That's what I had heard, but they were saying that he was saying that compared to some of the things that American law enforcement can do, that law enforcement that dealt with this were amazing. They did incredible things. And I do believe that it was just, an amazing case from the way he was talking about it.
Yeah, I think it's one of the first that, the amount of provinces and the amount of law enforcement services, right from municipal to provincial to our federal, the RCMP, it was probably one of the biggest ones. My only, what I was disappointed was that they didn't give the officer who was part of it, who was presenting, enough time. I think maybe we had an hour. He could probably do about a 2 or 3 day presentation on that. And there wasn't enough time. So I'd like to see him again. I'd like to get more information on it. But the odd time that always comes up, that North Preston's Finest, and one of the guys involved there.
That's interesting.
I haven't been held accountable. But it was quite the eye-opener when we saw that one.
Yeah, kudos to you guys, because that's, like I said, it seems like they did an amazing job.
Okay, Doc, you're on. We're nearing the end of the show. Steve Mormino had to leave, so I just want to say thank you, Steve. He had to go. And before we shut down, because Doc's going to close this show off, I just want to say to all of you.
I got nothing else. You take it.
No, you do. You have the POH still. So I want to just thank you all for being here. You're all such a great, important part of my life, and thank you for participating in this and helping get this across. If there's anything I can ever do for you, please let me know. Hope you guys have a safe night, and I want to thank all of our listeners out there. This is real. Please share this with your family and friends. Do the research, see how you can help out in your community, because every person, even just noticing someone, helps. You can save a life without even knowing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for having me, Amelia.
No, thank you. You can run your own show. But Doc's going to take over now. I'm going to be quiet.
I just want to say a couple of words about the Power of Hope Foundation that Amelia and I started. And it's for the survivors. And we wanted to be able to help. I don't want to call them victims because they are survivors, but it's survivors of violence, victims of violence. In some cases, it's the families because they lost a loved one to violence. In other cases, it's the actual people. And what we try to do is find resources. And resources like I'm working with 3 different associations of tattoo artists to get we all know in the big cities, Chicago, New York, San Francisco, they got groups that'll sit there and erase tattoos. These poor victims that are trafficked, very often they're branded with a tattoo, and they escape. Mm-hmm. But then every morning they wake up and look in the mirror, and they see that tattoo, and they have to live with that for the rest of their life. So we're getting little groups of tattoo artists all across the country. Kirby, Missouri. Who the hell heard of Kirby, Missouri? But I know a tattoo artist down there that'll erase the tattoo.